Harry Tido. Harry is a former Estonian diplomat and ambassador of Estonia to NATO, Poland, Finland and Afghanistan, as well as to the EU's Political and Security Committee. Then we have from Slovakia, Juraj Mesík, from the Slovak Foreign Policy Association. Juraj is a well-known economic and political analyst whose recent book on Russia's collapse I highly recommend. I think there are copies available. And last but not least, online we have Yaroslav Yurchyshin, member of the Ukrainian Parliament and one of the key members of the Verkhovna Rada's temporary special commission for interaction with the indigenous peoples of Russia. So let us begin with Valdez, and maybe I can also pose a question at the beginning for you. What are the main fears, would you say, in Lithuania regarding Russia? Is it a conventional military attack? Is it alternative scenarios of sabotage, destabilization, manipulation of the minority question, and so forth? And lastly, if you could say a few words about Russia's outpost on the Baltic Sea, named after the Bolshevik war criminal Kalinin. So, over to you, Valdez.
Thank you very much. Originally, I'm a historian of 18th century, so and also have possibility to have students in Torun University in Poland about 19th century. So, and I can see that from this long distance, we can observe how nations became part of empires, at the same time how they come back to the previous original state. So, and which factors are most important for such process? And in the first place, I will say that this is the culture. Culture and customs of sometimes system of church, also very important, to keep understanding that you are not part of this empire. And I have a possibility to live in Soviet Union, serve in Soviet army, meet a lot of people from different autonomous regions, republics. In our small unit we have 8 nationalities, 8 positions and 8 nationalities. And we have a lot of discussions between about possibility to be separate, to have independence. And they can say that differences in culture is the most decisive in such processes. Because if you not have strong enough to keep people between, to keep understanding that you are separate, you can be separate, and even if you get your independence, you don't know what to do with it. Because what is our debit? And in this process, most important factor is historical understanding of your past. If you have in past successful state, not important from which time, you can rebuild your national independence. For example, in our independence process in the beginning of 20th century, the most important, I will say, histories was about Grand Duchy of Lithuania golden time. This was not so golden because we are in permanent war with Crusaders, 200 years of fight, the longest war in Lithuanian history. But even in this time, state have some successes in defense, sometimes in offense, to building a state. And for every Lithuanian, it was understandable that we will come back to time of our grand dukes. In 1990, it was completely other story, because dukes are good, but more important was successful state, as the Lithuanians say, time of Antanas Smetona. Successful state, which take possibility for people with very small amount of educated people, really without intelligentsia, without ideas, without borders, this very complicated situation with Poland, but they understand that in case of success, yes, will be, and in 1990s, such understanding that we will come back to previous station between 1940 was the most important idea of people. They say, we will be. You can look to Finland, for example, because Finland in 1940 was more or less in the same situation. you can see how successful is the state. So, and if we will be not part of Soviet Union, will be the same living standards. I will say about, in simple words, what we're thinking this time. Of course, important was West values, possibility to travel, go through Iron Curtain, and a lot of ideas. But those ideas was very important. So really, each autonomous region, nation, not important which origin you are, they have to found in past something from the gold. Yes. Like in Buryatia, for example, my father grew up in Buryatia, in close to Irkutsk, and he said about Buryat's idea. He knows Buryat language, and when we go to visit, take my grandfather from this place to Lithuania, he visited the local village and stayed for one night in this village because he can speak this language. And Buryats this time were very optimistic about the future, and they say somewhere in past we empire or have something, yes. So such things are so important that even when you live in situation not so comfortable, invest into the culture, to the history, to the research if possible, to cultural events, because if you not have this background which connect people in one group, you will be not so successful even you get possibility to get independence. So cultural factor, I will see, is the most decisive. And sometimes not only through conflict with Russian Empire, because for some regions it's impossible to say, because in some cultures we have deep connections to, for example, Second World War success, like in Ukraine, for example. Yes. So they can't make a distance from this because they were part of this. Yes. So sometimes you have to develop your own story, which have connection to what people have in mind, and mobilize them for being maybe autonomous, not only independent, maybe to have some important areas when you have influence, but to work on culture. It's the most impressive and most important thing. And if you see with our independence way, we begin not from 1990, we begin from 1988 definitely. Yes, 3 years of preparing people brain to talk about truth, about people who go to Siberia, and about a vision. And for me, it's the most important question. In this forum, why I come here? What we are fighting for? What is our vision of future? Because now we have no future. Yes. It's defeat Russia by Ukrainian army. And what about what will be after this? And why people who live in East Europe, live in Siberia, in Caucasus, they have to have vision of successful life. Vision of successful life. To create something like West European Union, to create something like in East European. Why not? But you have to base your ideas on existing stories. You can immediately say that will be copy-paste. No copy-paste. Because differences in culture is so important that you have used them to create your own story.
Thank you, Valdez. Let's turn now to Harry. And Harry, one of the things I want to sort of throw in for you, if you could sort of mention it in your talk. Has Estonia reached out, and in what way, to some of the Ugro-Finnic indigenous peoples in Russia, particularly northern Russia, but also in the Middle Volga? And if not, to the degree that they could, what else could be done? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think this last question is better to refer to my colleague Oliver Loder. He's a specialist in this field, the Fenayug field. We have had different contacts, and we still do have meetings also, but it doesn't mean that we actively are working for some political solution. And in general, I would say that I prefer to talk about the case of Russian Empire, about regional identity, not ethnocratic identity. Because, well, a good example was our colleague Alexander from Königsberg, who said that he's indigenous Karenoi, as his parents arrived in the 50s, last century. It means that before the 50s there seemed to be an empty place. And also comparing his own arrival of his people to Americans, it means Red Indians were destroyed. It was genocidal, in fact. So it's not a very good example from one side, but from the other side, it's a good example of creating a local identity. And I remember during Leonard Perry conference, there was a lady from Buryatia who said that she's born in Buryatia, but identity is from St. Petersburg. So she feels she's from St. Petersburg. We have to work more on regional identity than ethical identity, I think. There was a question concerning the possible referendums. If 30% of population is local ethnicity, the rest are immigrants, what to do? Because if there is a referendum and everyone votes for independence, the 70% might be against. So we have to work on regional identity, not only on ethnicity, because Russians in Vladivostok feel totally different than Russians in Königsberg or Moscow and St. Petersburg, etc., etc. So that's why I refer to this regional identity. But coming to the heading, because it concerns the experience of Baltic states. Well, our experience is applicable and non-applicable. Background is totally different. We have majority ethnicity, but more important, we have pre-war republics. It means we were restoring independence, not gaining it. And that makes huge difference both legally and psychologically. So I can talk about some technicalities, because in a way I see the necessity of moving from talk to technical preparation work. The main task is still explaining in the West as well, especially, that Russia must be defeated in Ukraine. If you notice the statements by Western politicians, they say that Russia should not win and Ukraine should not be defeated, but they avoid saying that Russia must be defeated for some reason. And some reason comes out when they talk about the possibility of disintegrating Russia, that what about the nukes and etc., etc., it will be a bloodshed. And there was also a reference to the liberal opposition, who is of the same opinion that Russia, yes, in current borders, but of course with our Tsar and we as the new elite. So it would make certain difference, but the question is, whom does Western political elite listen to? I'm afraid they are more listening to this liberal opposition than to organizations as this one here. And that's why it takes a lot of work. That's why I think that recalling what we did, I remember better the preparation for EU and NATO, but basically, technically, it's the same. We collected all the nasty questions. I read about denuclearization, demilitarization, deputinization. It's a kind of de-organization, but every D must have expansion, what it means. For example, denuclearization, and talk about nuclear weapons in Russia. Okay, we have a map. In what republics or what regions do we have nuclear weapons? It should be clearly stated how much. It means that's a database, that's a file to show not all the regions have nuclear weapons. So in that case already the question is off the table. So let's limit the scope of this question. And demilitarization. How many troops we have in Russia in different regions? Which are most militarized? Where there is military industrial complex, it means the factories. It means that local population is gaining from the war through the factories because they have well-paid jobs. So we have to take it into consideration. Are they for continuation of the war or ending it? Because if the war ends, the jobs might end. they might lose a good income. And from what regions, how many men are sent to the front, to Ukraine? How many have been lost? Make a file by regions and show that, for example, Moscow and St. Petersburg, percentage-wise, the rate is much less. So again, it's compiling a database for the purpose of future explanation, not only in the Western countries, but also to the local population. Why should a region want to be separated from Moscow, or let's say independent? They have to be shown why it's viable and why it's useful. What are the current sources of income? For example, mines, industry, etc. Who owns it? Where does the profit come from, and where does the profit go to? How much of the region sends to Moscow, how much it gets back? So, sorry, it's boring technical work, but we did it on all the issues, and even we produced CDs to hand out this question, because it's useful, because, well, journalists can take it home and use it, and then use it for explanation as, well, material, even visual material, and so on and so forth. That's how it can be prepared, and that's where our experience can be used. Not the fact that, yes, we gained the independence, we regained it, and it's a huge difference. And also, the very unpleasant questions. For example, for all the opposition, not only this opposition in this room, but also the liberal opposition, do they think that they return on a white horse and they will be welcomed? I'm not sure. Why should they be? Because locals have been locals all the time. Opposition has been living in Western countries, and for locals, it's like they have been enjoying their life, we have been suffering, and now they come back and want to have the power. So I'm not sure there will be a warm welcome. And last but not least, if Russia disintegrates, what about war reparations? Who is going to pay for the war in Ukraine? Now we say Russia must pay. But if it disintegrates, should the reparation be disintegrating as well between the newly independent regions? Who decides? I'm afraid most of the regions would say, well, we're going for democracy, forget about it in our case. And the liberal opposition would say, no, we want to turn Russia into democracy, forget about the reparation, why should we pay? Because we want to build democracy. Sorry, but democracy has also a price. And I understand that the guilt is not on everyone, but responsibility is shared by every citizen. If I have an Estonian passport, it means I have certain rights. But if I have an Estonian passport, it means I share the responsibility whatever my country does, even if I don't like it. The same applies to Russian citizens. I've been trying to explain it in Estonia, because a number of Estonians and Russians who have Russian passport think it's kind of housewives. I can go to Russia to visit my relatives, shopping, etc. From the other side, I take Estonian passport, I go to Europe to do the same. So they think it's kind of housewives and that's it. No, passport means responsibility, and the responsibility for everything, including the war, including in case when the citizen does not share the guilt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. The importance of hard work and research and analysis to give a good argumentation for why Russia should collapse, should be fractured. Next we turn to Juraj, who's on the podium I see. Juraj, one of the questions I want you to cover, if possible, I think it's of interest to a lot of people. You are from Slovakia, obviously, but could you tell us a little bit about the different approach towards the Russia-Ukraine war between Slovakia and Czechia, particularly now with the new Fico government in Bratislava? I mean, is it a question of public opinion? Is it a question of political corruption, political connections? What are the differences here, different Slovak and Czech experience vis-a-vis Russia?
We are very friendly nations, but we are two different nations with different histories. And Czechs were always more pro-Western, Slovaks more splitted. And the current reality, well, it's a long-term reality. Slovaks are somewhat split between the East and West, and the split is almost like 50-50. At some election period, more pro-Western wins election, and then we have the government which was the first to give jet planes to Ukraine. It was the previous Slovak government. And then the other half wins, because we have democracy, and democracy comes with cost. And then we have fix of the government. But the differences between, and similarities between Czechs and Slovaks are for quite a different lecture. So let me stop here. But I would like to a little bit follow up on what Ambassador Tito said when he was touching the issue of the Western hesitance vis-a-vis Russia and post-Russia development. I think that yes, this is a serious and for many of us frustrating reality. But the West will follow what the Ukraine decides to do. It is really, in the current war, the Ukraine is the leader. Ukraine politicians and Ukrainian soldiers and generals on the battlefield really are deciding what are the European policies, what European policies follow. Remember February, March 2022, the all Western media across the ocean and in Europe were very defeatistic. The Kiev will fall in 3 days, in 7 days, in 2 weeks. All these big experts were, doing very, very, very wrong predictions. And then Ukraine did not fall, and I believe that Ukraine won the war in March 2022. It's not yet visible, but the war was won. So the Western democracies and democracies generally are naturally avoiding risky activities. For a democratic politician, it's always preferred to wait for the things to happen and then somehow adjust. To make decisions is what the democratic politicians unfortunately typically do. Just remember Munich 1938. And then the policies of the France and UK in 1939 when they let Poland fall. And then in 1940, 1941 when they let UK alone. They let France alone to fight Germany. Because American democracy was simply not able to make decisions that they are going to support UK or France in the fight against Germany. So compared to that time, we are actually in a better situation. We have some politicians and some decisions. There is a small trickling of weapons to Ukraine, but there are these, yes, 300 or how many times, and maybe thousands, but at least those. There was not a single airplane provided by the United States of America to Great Britain during the Battle of Britain. Battle of Britain, which was a decisive battle of the Second World War. It was not Stalingrad. It was Battle of Britain which decided the future of war, fundamentally. If the Britain would not win that war, the Stalingrad would fall. There's no doubt about it, just you need to think about the reality. Anyhow, I somehow got distracted. But I believe that Ukraine has power and has tools to win this war, to defeat Russia, and then the West will follow what Ukrainians will choose to do with the post-Russia space. not in the instrumental way, but the Ukrainians will really be in the position to design basic outlines of the future for the post-Russia space. Now, anyhow, we were asked to share some experiences. For many people here, Slovakia is a kind of strange country because we were not part of the Soviet Union. So, but I think that there are some useful lessons for the next phase for the post-war phase when the new independent states will emerge. We don't know how many and where they will be, but they will emerge. I assume that there will be a domino effect. The first probably will be Chechnya, and then the other will follow, but that there will be. And the question is what will happen. So and there is no recipe written for it. There will be a lot of improvisation, but there are possibilities to learn something from the other countries. Slovakia is quite similar to many post-Russian states. It's a small, landlocked country with a population of 5.6 million people, which is combined Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia together, roughly. Capital city is less than 500,000 people. This will be future of many post-Russian countries in a population-wise. It's a very mountainous country, covered by forest, not a lot of agricultural land, no oil, no gas, no coal, no mineral resources, but surrounded by prosperous countries and peaceful. And that is a privilege which will not necessarily have many post-Russian states. Because it's landlocked, it's totally export-dependent economy. It is top car manufacturer per country in the world today. And this is $27 billion for a 1 million cars produced annually for a population of 5.5 million people. So it's the big dependency on car manufacturing and car export. And this is a result of the transformation of our military industries, which we had during the communistic period. We had skilled people, but there was no demand for tanks. So eventually, gradually, our industries transformed and became major car producer. Many regions of Russia are heavily militarized. Their industries are heavily militarized. So you will be confronted with what to do with this military industry. Well, maybe there is something to learn from Slovakia. The first decade after the gaining independence from Russian occupation was decisive, and there I will speak about 6 specific aspects of our development in the first decade. The first, the occupation, obviously. It was top political task. Negotiations about Russian armies leaving Czechoslovakia started immediately, and the last Russian soldier left on June 21st, 1991. So within 18 months, the all Russian army, well, was so-called Soviet army, but Moscovian army was gone. It was a huge logistical task and so on. It happened before the breakdown of Czechoslovakia, a very important thing. And we were facing challenge of rebuilding democracy. We had democracy, Czechoslovakia had democracy. It was, the prehistory of the country is important, as you mentioned. Well, I would say that there is one important warning from our experiences, and that is political parties thrive on generating conflict, and they can be dangerous if they are created too soon. And also I want to stress the importance of election law, and for instance, large election districts are gifts to oligarchs and rich people, because it's technically impossible to run effective election campaign on the large territory unless you have million euros or bucks in your pocket. So these are small, tiny, practical things. Well, we face challenge of radical economic reforms, privatization. Again, all post-Russia states will be confronted with this issue. You will inherit economy which will be seriously damaged. Longer the war protracts, the more difficult economic situation will be, you will inherit. And there certainly will be kind of reprivatization, or how to call it, simply currently a huge part of the wealth in the Russian Empire is concentrated in the pockets of a very few ultra-rich, and you will need to deal with that. And my warning would be, you must eliminate Yedinorossi, KGB, old elites, brotherhoods, comrades from privatization. Otherwise, they will control your countries within few years, if you let them economically. Czechoslovakia will let divorce and state building may be a model to follow. There are some practical lessons. This picture shows our current presidents of Slovakia, Zuzana Čaputová and Petr Pavel, Czech president. As a result of velvet divorce, the relationships between our countries and peoples remained extremely positive, extremely good. There are differences, as Jan asked, but the relationships are extremely good. Another fifth important lesson which I want to stress is the building of civil society. If we would not build quite strong civil society organizations, NGOs and foundations, thousands of them, from social services, education, environmental, CBOs, community-based organizations, think tanks, advocacy and anti-corruption groups, we would lost our track toward the West. In 1998, we had one of those political swings when the previous government was drawing us to the east. We had a prime minister who said, if they don't accept us in the West, we will turn to the east. And it was a major effort of civil society in this ROK election, ROK campaign, which decided about that politician losing power and pro-reform, pro-Western politicians getting to power. Now, one more point. Very important was a role of American private foundations in supporting development of our civil society. In particular, American, in particular private, although US aid it was also very effective because they were fast, flexible, non-bureaucratic, and they really were trying honestly to build on local knowledge. Unlike many European donors who believe that they know what you are supposed to do when they don't. My last, well, of course, critical for us, and we feel it now when we have this Fico's government with this pro-Russian rhetoric, it was EU and NATO integration. No turn to the east happened. In 2004, we were accepted to NATO, but our neighbors, including Czech Republic and Poland and Hungary, were accepted 5 years ahead of us. Because during the 90s, during this struggle for the orientation, we simply lost the train went. So we joined NATO in 2004. In May 2004, we also joined the European Union. Then in 2007, we joined Schengen era, and in 2009, we adopted Euro. No Poland, no Czech Republic, no Hungary adopted Euro. But for our anchor to the West, Euro adoption is critically important. Every economist understands that. And just one note, Montenegro and Kosovo unilaterally introduced Euro as their currency. That may be something you may consider once you will be dealing with, governing your your new independent states. What kind of currency are you going to work with? With rubles, or how are you going to economically operate? Okay. I have a much longer presentation, but okay. Anyhow, the first thing is to win the war in Ukraine. To win the war in Ukraine, we in the West need to get rid of this learned helplessness and of a defensive posture. We always want to defend ourselves from this powerful Russia, despite being much more stronger in economic, military, technological, all kinds of terms. But we want to defend ourselves. We are talking about Sulavki corridor, when to destroy military bases in Kaliningrad would be quite easy. Wars are won by attacking, not by defending.
Okay, on that note, thank you, Ray, and it's good suggestions as well, thank you. Our next speaker is online. I hope Yaroslav is there. We have Yaroslav Yurchishin from Kyiv.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi Yaroslav, good to see you.